We're selling the house, Mom. Sign the papers or we'll get a court order. Gloria Reyes looked at her two sons sitting across the kitchen table. The table she'd built from scrap pine 30 years ago, sanded by hand, stained with coffee rings and homework marks and the ghost of every meal she'd ever served. And she understood that the men in front of her were strangers wearing her children's faces. "Your father left this house to me," she said. "Dad left debts," said Derek, the older one. 44, realtor's license. The kind of smile that sold houses to people who didn't need them. The reverse mortgage he took out is underwater. The property taxes are 3 years behind. The foundation has cracks. You're sitting in a money pit, Mom. I'm sitting in my home. It's not your home if the bank takes it. And they will. In about 6 weeks. Derek slid the papers across the table. Sign it over to us. We'll sell before foreclosure, pay off the debts, and split whatever's left. And I go where? We've been through this. That was Kyle, the younger one, 41. He hadn't looked up from his phone since he sat down. There's a senior facility in Tucson. Shared rooms, $1,800 a month. You can cover it with Social Security. A shared room. It's clean. It has activities. It has bingo and a roommate who smells like Bengay. Mom. I'm 67 years old. I've lived in this house for 34 years. I raised you in these rooms. I nursed your father through 2 cancers in that bedroom. And you're asking me to sign it all away so you can split whatever crumbs fall off the table. Derek's jaw tightened. We're trying to help. You're trying to cash out. Silence. The kind that happens when the truth is in the room and nobody wants to acknowledge it walked in. Kyle finally looked up from his phone. You have until Friday, Mom. After that, we file the petition with or without your signature. They left. The screen door slapped shut. 2 cars started. 2 cars pulled away. Gloria sat at the pine table in a house that was rotting underneath her and drowning in debt above her, and she did the math she'd been avoiding for 6 months. Social Security, $1,480 a month. Savings, $612. Debts, more than she could count. The reverse mortgage Hector had taken out, without telling her, during the chemo fog when his signature shook and the notary didn't ask questions, had consumed $140,000 of equity she didn't know she'd lost. She couldn't save the house. Derek was right about that, even if his motives were wrong. The numbers didn't work. They hadn't worked since Hector died and left her a love letter on the nightstand and a financial disaster in the filing cabinet. But she wasn't signing anything. And she wasn't going to a shared room in Tucson. She was going somewhere else. If you've ever been backed into a corner by the people who were supposed to have your back, subscribe and stay until the end. Because what Gloria Reyes found in the Mojave Desert wasn't just a place to live. It was a town. An entire abandoned town. And what she built there made the sons who threw her away drive 200 miles to beg her to come home. Gloria packed the truck at 4 a.m., not Derek's truck or Kyle's truck. Her truck, a 2003 Ford F-15, that Hector had bought used in 2008, and she'd kept running through mechanical stubbornness and a relationship with a mechanic named Sal, who charged her half price because she'd once driven his mother to dialysis 3 times a week for a year without asking for gas money. She packed what mattered. Clothes, tools, Hector's tools, the good ones, the Craftsman set he'd saved 2 years to buy. A camping stove, water jugs, canned food, blankets, a first aid kit. Hector's Bible, a photograph of the 4 of them, her, Hector, Derek, Kyle, taken at Christmas 1998 when the boys were still young enough to sit on laps and the world still made sense. She left everything else. The furniture, the dishes, the curtains she'd sewn, the filing cabinet full of debts that belonged to a dead man. Let the bank have it. Let Derek sell the bones. She was done fighting for a house that had been stolen from underneath her by a mortgage she never signed. She drove east, into the desert. Because the desert was the one place where nobody asked what you owned or what you'd lost, or why a 67-year-old woman was driving alone at dawn with everything she had in the bed of a pickup truck. She drove for 6 hours, past Tucson, past the senior facilities and the shared rooms and the bingo. Past the last gas station where the attendant looked at her like she was making a mistake, and she looked back like she was making a choice, and those were different things. The highway thinned. The desert opened. Red rock and scrub brush and a sky so wide it hurt to look at. She pulled off the highway onto a dirt road because the gas gauge was dropping and she needed to stop and think. The road wound through a canyon, climbing slowly, the truck protesting every rut. And then the canyon opened into a valley, and Gloria stopped the truck and stared. A town. Not a gas station or a rest stop or a cluster of abandoned trailers. A town. 30, maybe 40 structures spread along a main street that ran straight through the valley floor like a spine. Buildings of wood and stone and corrugated metal, bleached by sun, scoured by wind, standing in the particular silence of places that had been left alone long enough to forget they'd ever been occupied. Gloria got out of the truck. The heat hit her like a wall. 103 degrees, but dry. The kind of dry that pulls moisture from your skin before you know you're sweating. She walked toward the nearest building, a general store, or what had been one. The sign above the door was gone, but the shape of the letters remained. Sun-bleached outlines on the wood like a negative photograph. Harper and Son, EST, 1923. The door was open, not ajar, gone. Just an empty frame leading into a dim interior that smelled like dust and old wood and the particular sweetness of desert air trapped in a closed space. Shelves lined the walls, empty mostly. A counter with a manual cash register, the keys rusted open. A calendar on the wall, June 1971, the month the town died. Gloria walked the main street. Each building told a piece of the story. A post office with mail slots still labeled with names. A schoolhouse with desks bolted to the floor and a chalkboard that still showed the ghost of cursive letters. A church, small, white, the steeple leaning but holding. A mechanic's garage with a lift that still worked when she tested it. A diner with a counter and stools and a kitchen that had pots hanging from hooks like they were waiting for a cook to show up. Houses, 12 of them, along the streets that branched off the main road. Some collapsed, some standing, all empty. She found a water tower, rusted but the tank was intact. And when she climbed the ladder, slowly, her knees complaining with every rung, and looked inside, she found it dry but structurally sound. Fed by a pipe that ran underground toward the hills, a well system. Desert towns survived on wells. "Hello?" she called out. Her voice echoed off the canyon walls and came back to her empty. Nobody. Nothing. Just the wind and the heat and a town that had been abandoned 53 years ago and was still standing because the desert preserved what it took. Slowly, patiently, without malice or mercy. Gloria Reyes stood in the middle of a dead town's main street, 67 years old, $612 in her pocket, and she felt something she hadn't felt since Hector died. Possibility. Not the bright, naive kind, the hard kind. The kind that comes with a price tag of labor and heat and loneliness and the daily negotiation between what your body can do and what your situation demands. But possibility, real, solid, standing in front of her like 30 buildings that needed a reason to exist. "Okay," she said to the empty street. "Let's see what you've got." Tap like if you've ever looked at something everyone else called worthless and seen something worth fighting for. Because what Gloria built in this desert changed not just her life, but the lives of people she hadn't met yet. The first week was survival. Gloria moved into the house closest to the general store. Stone walls, tin roof with one hole she could patch. She set up the camping stove, hung a blanket over the doorway, and started solving problems in order of lethality. Water first. The well was dry. She drove 45 minutes to Ray's gas station every 3 days to fill jugs. 14 gallons. That was her life, measured in gallons, rationed with the precision of a woman who understood that wasting water in the desert was the same as wasting time at 67. She ate canned food on the porch watching sunsets that no shared room in Tucson could have shown her. And she worked. Hector's craftsman tools, fixed the porch, replaced rotten window frames with salvaged wood, sealed wall gaps with desert clay. Her knees hurt. Her back screamed. Her hands blistered, calloused, blistered again. By the end of the second week, the house was livable. A salvaged bed frame, a thrift store mattress, a shelf she'd built for canned goods, and Hector's Bible. The third week, she found the water. She'd been exploring the hills behind the town, following the old pipe from the water tower, when she found the wellhead, a concrete cap set into the hillside, sealed but not destroyed. The pipe ran from the cap down to the tower, gravity-fed, the way desert water systems worked before electricity made people lazy. She pried off the cap, dropped a stone, counted. 3 seconds before the splash. Water, not deep, maybe 40 feet, clean, cold, fed by an underground spring that the desert had hidden the way it hid everything. Patiently, beneath the surface, waiting for someone stubborn enough to look. Gloria spent 4 days rehabilitating the well, cleared debris from the pipe, patched 3 leaks with epoxy and clamps from Hector's toolbox, opened the valve at the water tower. At 2:17 p.m. on a Tuesday, water flowed into the tower for the first time in 53 years. Gloria stood below and watched it stream from the outflow pipe, clear, cold, tasting like minerals and time and vindication. She cried, standing in 106-degree heat, covered in dust and pipe grease, with water streaming over her hands and her face and the ground at her feet. She cried. Not from sadness, from the pure physical relief of solving the problem that every other problem depended on. She had water. She had shelter. She had food for another month. She had tools and daylight and a body that hurt but still worked. She was alive, in a dead town in the desert, and she was going to make it breathe again. The gas station attendant noticed first. His name was Ray Delgado, 61. He'd been running the station for 19 years. He knew every regular, the truckers, the ranch hands, the occasional tourist who'd taken a wrong turn and needed directions back to the highway. He didn't know Gloria, but he noticed her. Every 3 days, same truck, same jugs, same polite smile, same cash payment. She bought gas, water, canned food, and once, a bag of cement mix that weighed more than she did. "You building something out there?" he asked one day. "Rebuilding," she said. "Rebuilding what?" "A town." Ray looked at her, looked at the truck, looked at the desert stretching behind her like a dare. "Which town?" "I don't know its name yet. It's in the canyon about 45 minutes east. Main Street, 30 buildings, abandoned since 71. Ray's expression changed. "You're talking about Siler Springs. Is that what it's called?" "Was. Mining town. Silver mostly. The mine played out in 69, everybody left by 71. My grandfather worked there when he was young." Ray leaned on the counter. "Nobody's been out there in years. The county wrote it off. Land's technically BLM, Bureau of Land Management. Federal." Gloria's stomach tightened. "Federal land?" "The mining claims lapsed decades ago. The structures are technically abandoned property on public land. Nobody owns them." He paused. "But nobody's told anyone to leave either. BLM doesn't patrol out there. They've got bigger problems." "So I can stay?" "I'm not a lawyer, ma'am. But people homestead on BLM land all the time in this part of the state. Long as you're not running a business or mining or doing anything that triggers federal attention, they mostly leave you alone." Gloria bought an extra bag of cement mix, and a tarp, and a pack of batteries. "You're really doing this," Ray said. Not a question. "I'm really doing this. My grandfather always said Siler Springs was the prettiest place he ever worked. Said the sunset from the church porch could make a hard man pray." He was right about the sunset. Ray looked at her for a long moment. Then he reached under the counter and pulled out a card. "My nephew, Eddie. He's a well driller, semi-retired, lives about an hour from here. If you've got water issues, he's the one to call." "I found the well already, got it running." Ray's eyebrows rose. "You got the Siler Springs well running?" By yourself? My husband was a plumber. I learned. Your husband must have been something. He was everything. Gloria pocketed the card, but he's gone. So now I am. If you've ever rebuilt yourself from nothing in a place nobody believed in, stay with me. Because Gloria wasn't alone in that desert for long, and the people who found her weren't the ones she expected. The first person to find Siler Springs was a woman named Connie Begay, 58, Navajo, silversmith. She'd been driving the back roads selling jewelry at trading posts and gas stations when her van broke down 12 miles from the canyon. She walked because that's what you did in the desert when your van died and your phone had no signal, and followed the road until she saw the water tower. I thought I was hallucinating, Connie said later. A water tower in the middle of nowhere with water in it. Then I smelled beans cooking. Gloria heard the footsteps on the porch, grabbed the tire iron she kept by the door. Hello? A woman's voice, tired, not threatening. Gloria opened the door. Connie stood there, dusty, sunburned, a bag of silver jewelry over one shoulder and a look on her face that Gloria recognized immediately. The look of a woman who'd been walking longer than she should have. Water, Connie said. Please. Gloria gave her water, then beans, then a place to sit on the porch while the sun went down and the desert cooled and two women who'd never met shared a meal because that's what people did when there was nothing else to do. What is this place? Connie asked. Siler Springs, old mining town. You live here? I do now. By yourself? So far. Connie looked at the main street, the buildings, the water tower. How long have you been here? 6 weeks. And you fixed all this yourself? The house and the well. The rest is still a mess. Connie set down her bowl. My van's dead on the road. Transmission, I think. I can't afford a tow. Hector's garage has a lift that works. If you can get the van here, I might be able to help. You fix transmissions too? My husband fixed everything. I watched for 30 years. Something stuck. They towed the van the next morning using Gloria's truck and a chain she found in the garage. The transmission was shot, a cracked housing that couldn't be repaired with the tools they had. But Connie had money from jewelry sales. Gloria drove to the auto parts store an hour away. They spent 3 days in the garage, shoulder deep in a van that smelled like sage and transmission fluid, and fixed it. Connie didn't leave. The van works, Gloria said on the 4th morning, drinking coffee on the porch. I know. You can go. I know. Connie looked at the main street. But where am I going? Another trading post? Another gas station parking lot? Another night sleeping in a van that smells like gear oil? She turned to Gloria. I've been driving for 11 years, since my husband died. I sell jewelry. I sleep in the van. I eat at gas stations. I haven't had a kitchen in over a decade. She pointed at the house next to Gloria's. That one. Is it empty? They're all empty. Can I have it? Gloria looked at the house. Stone walls, tin roof, needed work, like everything in Siler Springs. It's not mine to give. It's not anyone's to give. That's the point. Connie moved in that afternoon. By the end of the week, she'd patched the roof, swept the floors, and set up a silversmithing bench on the porch where the afternoon light was best. 2 women, 2 houses, 1 town. The 3rd resident arrived 11 days later. Ray Delgado had told someone, who'd told someone, who'd told a man named Frank Bautista, 72, retired carpenter, widowed, living in a trailer park in Yuma where the rent kept going up and the AC kept breaking down. Frank drove up in a truck older than Gloria's, loaded with lumber and carpentry tools and a dog named Whiskey, who was missing 1 ear and had the disposition of a retired prizefighter. Heard there's a town needs building, Frank said from the truck window. There's a town needs everything, Gloria replied. I'm a carpenter. I build everything. Park wherever you want. Pick a house? Frank picked the one next to the church. By the end of his first week, he'd rebuilt the church porch, rehung the steeple, and constructed a community table from salvaged lumber, long enough to seat 12, set up in the shade between the general store and the diner. They ate there every evening. Gloria's beans and rice, Connie's fry bread, Frank's chili, which he claimed was his wife's recipe and which Whiskey refused to eat, which said something about either the chili or the dog. More people came. Not many. Not fast. But steadily, the way water finds its way through rock. One crack at a time. Ray's nephew Eddie drove out to check the well. Ended up staying a week, then 2, then moving his trailer to the edge of town and drilling a second well that doubled the water supply. A woman named Patrice showed up with 2 teenage daughters and a story about a landlord who'd evicted them for reporting black mold. She took the house at the end of Main Street and opened the schoolhouse for her girls, teaching them herself from textbooks she'd brought in garbage bags. A retired electrician named Howard, 70 from Vegas, tired of the noise, rigged a solar array from panels he'd been collecting for years, storing them in a shed he was about to lose. 12 panels. Enough for lights, phone charging, and a refrigerator in the general store that Connie had turned into a community kitchen. By the end of the 3rd month, Siler Springs had 9 residents. By the 6th month, 17. Each one arrived with a version of the same story. Displaced, discarded, priced out, written off. Too old, too poor, too broken for the world they'd been living in. And each one found what Gloria had found. A place that asked nothing except labor and offered everything except comfort. They built. Not a commune or a compound or a cult. Nothing organized, nothing ideological. Just people fixing buildings and growing food and sharing meals and sleeping in houses they'd rebuilt with their own hands on land that didn't technically belong to anyone. Gloria became the mayor, not because anyone voted, but because she'd been there first and she made the best beans and she was the kind of woman who, when a pipe burst at 3 a.m. or a rattlesnake got into someone's kitchen, showed up with tools and solved the problem before the sun rose. "You're the mayor," Frank said one morning at breakfast. "I'm a 67-year-old woman living in a desert." "Same thing out here." Tap like if you believe that the places the world throws away are sometimes the places where the best things get built. Because Siler Springs was about to get noticed. And not everyone who noticed was friendly. The article appeared in the Arizona Republic on a Sunday in March. Ghost Town Reborn, Displaced Seniors Build Community in Abandoned Mojave Settlement. A freelance journalist named Maya Torres had been doing a story on rural homelessness when Ray Delgado mentioned the town in the canyon. She'd driven out, spent 3 days, and written a piece that made Gloria's story sound like something between a Western and a miracle. The article went viral, shared 40,000 times in the first week. News crews requested access, a documentary filmmaker called. 3 different foundations offered money, and Derek called. Gloria was on the church porch, the one Frank had rebuilt, watching the sunset Ray's grandfather had described 50 years ago, when her prepaid phone buzzed with a Tucson number. "Mom." "Derek." I read the article. "Okay. You're living in an abandoned mining town in the desert." "I am." "With strangers. With neighbors, there's a difference." Silence. Then, "Mom, this is crazy. You're 67. You're in the middle of nowhere. What if you get sick? What if something breaks? What if something broke, Derek? The house your father built. You sold it. Something broke and it was my life and I fixed it. That's what I do. That's what your father taught me. You fix what breaks. You don't throw it away." I was trying to help. "You were trying to get paid. There's a difference." More silence. Longer. "The article says you've got 17 people living there. Is that true?" 19 now. A couple from Flagstaff arrived yesterday. He's a plumber, she's a teacher. "And you're the mayor?" "I'm the person who was here first. People call me whatever they want." "Mom, I want to see you." Then drive. He came the next Saturday. Kyle came too. The first time both sons had been in the same place since the kitchen table where they'd told her to sign or get a court order. They parked at the edge of town and walked in. Gloria watched them from the church porch. They looked disoriented. the way city people looked when they encountered a place that operated on different rules than the ones they understood. Derek looked at the main street. The patched roofs, the solar panels, the community table where Frank was serving morning coffee, the garden Patrice had planted between the general store and the diner. Tomatoes, peppers, squash, pushing up through desert soil that everyone had said couldn't grow anything. "You did this?" Derek said. "We did this. 19 people, 6 months." Kyle looked at the water tower. "Where does the water come from?" "A well. Underground spring. I rehabilitated it myself." "You rehabilitated a well." "Your father was a plumber, Kyle. I paid attention." They walked the town. Gloria showed them everything: the houses, the store, the school, the church, the garage where Connie's van had been the first repair and now served as the workshop for everything mechanical. She introduced them to Frank and Connie and Eddie and Patrice and Howard and the others who'd found their way to a dead town and brought it back to life. Derek and Kyle were quiet, the particular quiet of men confronting evidence that the woman they'd dismissed was more capable than they'd ever imagined. At dinner, the community table, beans and fry bread and Frank's chili, 21 people eating together under a sky that had more stars than either son had seen since childhood. Derek leaned over to Gloria. "I'm sorry, Mom." She looked at him, waited. "I'm sorry about the house, about the papers, about telling you to go to a facility. I was wrong. I saw a problem I could sell, and I forgot there was a person inside it." "You forgot your mother was a person." "Yeah." His voice cracked. "I did." "Your father would be ashamed." "I know. But he'd also be proud of what I built here. And he'd tell you that being ashamed is only useful if it changes what you do next." Kyle spoke up. First time all evening. "What can we do?" Gloria looked at her sons, the strangers who were, underneath the real estate license and the phone addiction, still the boys she'd raised. "The schoolhouse needs a new roof. The diner needs plumbing. And Frank's knees are giving out, so he needs help with the carpentry." She paused. "You could start with that." "We don't know how to build anything, Mom." "I know. I'll teach you." They came back the next weekend, and the one after that. Derek learned to frame a roof. Kyle learned to sweat a copper pipe. They were terrible at both. City hands, soft from office work, blistering by the second hour. But they showed up. And showing up in Siler Springs was the only currency that mattered. The BLM inquiry came in month 8, a form letter from a regional office asking Gloria to describe the nature and purpose of the occupation of structures on BLM-administered land in the Siler Springs area. Gloria called the only lawyer she knew, Derek's old college roommate, a man named Paul Chen who specialized in federal land law and owed Derek a favor from something involving a spring break incident neither of them would discuss. Paul drove out, looked at the town, read the BLM letter, and said, "This is actually less complicated than you'd think." "Really?" BLM land can be claimed for residential use under certain conditions. The structures predate BLM administration. They were built during active mining claims. You haven't altered the land use. You've rehabilitated existing structures. And there's a provision for community land trusts on abandoned federal parcels that nobody uses because nobody lives in abandoned mining towns. Until now. Until now. Paul smiled. "I'll file the paperwork. It'll take 6 months, maybe a year. But if the community establishes a formal trust, maintains the structures, and doesn't interfere with any federal resource management, which you can't because there are no federal resources out here, you'll get a long-term lease at nominal cost." "How nominal?" $1 per year per structure. Gloria looked at the town. 30 buildings, $30 a year. That's less than the property tax on the house Derek sold. Considerably less. The paperwork took 10 months. Paul handled it. The community trust was established, the Siler Springs Restoration Trust, with Gloria as founding trustee. Every resident signed. The BLM approved the lease with minimal pushback. An abandoned mining town being restored by displaced seniors was, as one bureaucrat admitted off the record, The best possible use of land we'd literally forgotten we had. The lease was signed on a Tuesday in October. Gloria signed it at the community table, surrounded by 23 people who'd built a town from nothing, using the same pen she'd refused to use when Derek slid foreclosure papers across a kitchen table in Tucson. Different papers, she said, and everyone laughed. A year after Gloria drove into the canyon, Siler Springs had 27 residents, a working school, a community kitchen, solar power, 2 wells, a garden that produced enough food to reduce everyone's grocery bill by half, and a waiting list. A waiting list. For an abandoned mining town in the Mojave Desert that nobody had visited in 53 years. People called, wrote letters, drove out unannounced the way Gloria had, looking for the same thing she'd been looking for. Not charity, not rescue, but a place where your labor was your rent and your neighbors were your safety net, and nobody asked what you used to be, because what mattered was what you could do. The documentary aired on PBS in February. Gloria watched it on a screen Howard had rigged up in the church. The whole town packed into pews, watching themselves on television, laughing at the parts that made them look tough and getting quiet at the parts that showed what they'd left behind. The closing shot was Gloria on the church porch at sunset. The sky behind her was on fire. Orange and purple and gold, the kind of sky that made you understand why people believed in things bigger than themselves. They asked me why I came here, Gloria said to the camera. I told them the truth. I didn't come here. I ran out of everywhere else. My son sold my house. My husband left me debts instead of a future. I had $612 in a truck and a set of tools, and I drove until I found a place that was as broken as I was. She looked at the town behind her. The lights coming on in the windows. The sound of Frank's dog barking at something in the desert. The smell of dinner being cooked in a kitchen that hadn't existed 6 months ago. The difference is, I knew how to fix things. My husband taught me that. Fix what's broken. Don't throw it away. Don't wait for someone else. Pick up the tools and do the work yourself. She paused. They called this town dead. They said the desert took it. But the desert doesn't take things. It holds them. It held these buildings for 53 years, waiting for someone to come back and give them a reason to stand. She looked into the camera. I'm that reason. We all are. 27 people who the world decided were too old, too poor, too broken to matter. And we built a town. Not because we're special. Because we were desperate, and desperate people don't waste time asking for permission. They pick up a hammer and they start. The screen went dark. The church was quiet. Then Frank started clapping, and Connie joined, and Patrice's daughters whistled, and Whiskey barked because Whiskey barked at everything, and Gloria sat in the front pew and let the sound wash over her like water from a well she'd brought back to life with her own 2 hands. She was 67. She lived in a desert. She had $340 in savings, arthritis in both knees, and a town that called her mayor. It was everything Hector would have wanted for her. Not the desert or the poverty or the distance from their sons, but the building, the fixing, the refusal to sit in a shared room and wait for the world to decide she was finished. She wasn't finished. She was just getting started.